Hello, I am Brenda Harkins with Loud is Not a Language, and welcome to the VIP Roundtable series, where we're talking about hard times turning low points into launch pads. And 2020 has been a year where there's plenty of that going on. We've got plenty of low points that we need to turn to launch pads. So one of the ways that we have identified how to do that is something that every single one of us can do. And that is to be a VIP. And what that stands for, the V has to do with your value, your victories, and your voice. The I is your identity, your influence, and your impact. And the P is your purpose and your power and your potential. So when you remember your value and you look back at your victories, you begin to discover your voice. And then you move more into your sense of identity and you're able to influence with greater impact so that you can live out your purpose with power to the fullest potential. Every single one of us can do that. And so I am so happy today to have my friend and leader that I admire greatly on here with us, LaTasha McDougle, and she's just all kinds of amazing, y'all. I mean, you're gonna love her. I want to tell you a little bit about her. She, in 2019, she was given 3 significant awards. One is the International Alliance World of Difference Award, the Best of Fort Worth, Texas Philanthropist, and the Women's Center Community Recognition. In 2018, she was the Fort Worth Business Press Minority Leader. And in 2017, she was the winner of Case Manager for her work in Judge Carr's RISE program, which works with victims of human trafficking. In 2016, she was a recipient of the Mitch Poe Public Service Award. And I'm telling you what, she is a graduate of University of Texas at Arlington with a Bachelor's of Science in Social Work, a Honors Master of Science in Social Work, and an Honors Master of Criminology and Criminal Justice. Did I get all of that right?
Yes.
You're amazing. So she has been a published author. She's a publishing author of The Prosecutor's Role in Helping Domestic Violence Victims. And she's a contributing author to the Dethroning Domestic Violence of Survival and Victory. Currently, she's working as a case manager in Tarrant County over the Domestic Violence Diversion Program, and she's the founder of the nonprofit Cheryl's Voice. Welcome, my friend. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm pretty sure everybody's like, do she sleep? No.
Nope. I know you don't. Oh, so just before I want you to share your story. Before you do, I know you share my heart in this and saying to the people listening that there is no comparison in the pain that we all go through. That some people listening today are going to identify with the tragedies that LaTasha describes, and some are going to not have had that extreme of an expression. And I just want to say, don't minimize your pain. Good friend of mine had a sister. She was in the hospital, just dying of cancer. And my friend was sitting by her bed. She was helping her walk through the pain, and she'd been awake for hours to where my friend's head was just pounding. You know how sometimes things just come out of your mouth and you don't realize it? At one point, her head was hurting so bad, she just said, "Oh, my head's killing me." And immediately was just like, how stupid. My sister is dying of cancer, and I'm saying I have a headache. And her sister looked at her and she said, "Sissy, pain is pain. Go deal with your headache so you can help me deal with my pain." And I mean, I know you share that with me. That's what you're here to do today. I think that sharing your pain and your overcoming of that gives others the ability to acknowledge theirs and to overcome theirs and to just keep that ball rolling. So I'm going to turn it over to you and ask you to start when you were 18 months old.
Well, I'm from Fort Worth, and I currently live in Fort Worth. Unfortunately, when I was 18 months, I was left for dead in a car in an alley in Fort Worth. I had witnessed my father kill my mother and then kill himself. It wasn't until the next day some children were cutting through the alley and they happened to look into the car and they went and got help. Um, so I was immediately orphaned and given to my grandparents, which is my mom's parents, to care for me. That just really started a catapult of, a conversation that people don't really talk about when it comes to children who witness abuse. And I just really didn't understand where my mom was and why. And so it wasn't until I I got older, I think around middle school, I had a teacher tell me that unfortunately, um, the teacher says, "Oh, LaTasha, it's so unfortunate that statistics says because you are orphaned and raised by your grandparents, you are less likely to succeed." That was very hurtful for a teacher to tell me something like that. But luckily, I have amazing grandparents who rally around me. I won't say what my grandmother did to the teacher, but
But
uh,
we would join her in that. I have a feeling.
yeah. But my granddad told me, LaTasha, you can do anything that God has called you to do. And I really didn't get that at that such a young age, but I received it. And so it just, over the years, you struggle with um, thoughts. And I blame myself a lot for my mom's death, which I really know that it was just the enemy trying to get me. He thought I would die at 18 months. And because I didn't, he saw the purpose God had for me in my life and he wanted to destroy that. And thank God I had a praying grandmother who saw my suicidal notes and saw my pictures of crying out for help. And she put those in her Bible and was praying over me. And over a period of time, I was able to say, okay, I have to figure out what's going on and figure out why I'm so angry, figure out why I'm in pain, and what can I do about it. By the time I made it to college, I decided that I was going to go to therapy. But before I did that, which I don't encourage anybody to do this, I did a full investigation on the loss of my mom. I actually went down to Forward PD and I asked them to give me records. And I was shockingly surprised to see a stack of police reports and CPS cases and all kinds of stuff that she did everything she could to try to reach out for help. And unfortunately, law enforcement and the prosecution's office failed her at that time. And we are talking about in the 80s, where domestic violence really wasn't something that people would have a lot of resources for. There was some things out there, like she used some of the resources, the Women's Center, and also Women's Haven, it was called at the time. But it still wasn't enough. I mean, my dad was stalking before stalking was even a law, and he ultimately decided that he wanted to have the final say. And so during that investigation, it did land me into therapy, and I was like, I was just so all over the place, and I'm like, okay, what do I do with this? And then I realized that it was time for me to turn all of that pain and all that hurt into something good. And not only that, I had to recognize that I was blessed to have grandparents to raise me, but there are so many children who are in our juvenile detention center, so many children who don't have families that are telling them, hey, you can beat statistics, you can overcome this. Walking along that journey with them, or even letting them know that they're not alone with what they're feeling. It just wasn't there. And so that's when I decided, okay, I need to start talking about this. I need to start dealing with this. And I need to start encouraging, empowering others that they can do the same. I need to start educating families that their children are affected no matter how young they are. A lot of times we hear victims, say, oh, my child was in the other room, or they're young, and they don't realize that the physical pain that their child is under. I have so many health issues, brittle bones, and just a whole bunch of stuff just from witnessing the abuse at a young age.
The
And
trauma.
then the trauma, yes. And so when you have this childhood trauma, people don't recognize the fact that your child, you may think that they're not affected, but they are. And you have to be proactive. You have to get them some trauma counseling. You have to have those conversations with the doctor to make sure that you're being proactive about their healthcare needs. All of those things are important. And so that's really, kind of how it started. Because I mean, I really didn't like talking about my mom. I didn't like, I looked so much like her. And so I remember growing up, I would be in the store and some person would say, called my mom's name instead of my name. And because they wouldn't remember my name, but they knew my mom's name. And I would be so upset, so, distraught by it. But I've, turned over a whole new leaf with that. But it took a lot of work, and it's not something that I take lightly. It's not something that I try to tell people that, oh, it's easy. You just wake up magically and you're good. It's nothing like that. It takes a lot of prayer, work, and a lot of therapy to be able to get to the point of peace and have a conversation about empowerment and encouraging others.
Yeah, you have come so far, and I know you have so much wisdom. I'm going to just kind of pick apart some of the things that you've said and have you expound on that a little bit, okay? Because what a horrible, hurtful thing for a teacher to say to you. But just your whole childhood experience after that, I would imagine that really messed with your sense of value as a person. And
yeah, well, sort of. Because I had grandparents who were always constantly giving me words of affirmation. And I mean, I'm the most beautiful girl in the world, according to my grandmother. And so all of these things and how smart I am and how I can do all these things was helpful. However, there were moments to where I felt like maybe I could fail. And so I think being told that kind of catapulted me into a way where I didn't want anyone asking me about the loss of my mom. So I always tell people there are two types of children that are in trauma. The first type is really easy to recognize. They act out, they get in fights, the trouble kid. The second type people miss, which was me. I'm the one who, president of student council, president of this club, making straight A's in this, just excelling in every area because I wanted people to talk about how great LaTasha was and how friendly she is. And I was student council, I was class favorite, I was all of these things. I wanted them to focus on that, and maybe they will forget about the fact that I was orphaned and raised with my grandparents. Maybe they wouldn't ask me about my mom. And so I was kind of smiling on the outside and dying on the inside from the pain and the anger that I had. And so it was kind of like a double-edged sword about when it comes to value. I felt good on the outside, but I was really feeling, bad and nervous about failing on the inside. I didn't want to disappoint my grandparents. I didn't want to get into a point in life to where I would end up in a abusive relationship. I was scared of failing. And so I would try to do all these things to overcompensate myself. And I remember I was listening to Terry Crews talk about success is a safe place to hide. And that's really what I did with my life, was try to have all these great successes so I could hide away from everybody else on what I was dealing with. It was way until college before I really opened up and started dealing with the pain.
Say that again. Success is
the safest place to hide.
Safest place to hide. Wow. I wonder how many people can relate to that.
Yes.
Wow.
Probably a lot.
Yeah.
Probably a lot. I mean, because you just have two paths. You either have a path to destruction, or you have that one that's just kind of always. And I mean, if you think about it, think about some of the people that we've seen, and you're like, oh my God, that person committed suicide. They were always so happy, and they were always so this and this and this, and had no idea that person was really suffering, and nobody took the time to ask, how are you doing? I can actually say now, I do have people that will text me every once in a while, like, I'm praying for you, or How are you doing? They recognize that I'm not always strong. I may appear that way all the time, but I do have my moments and I do have my downtime where I need someone to reach out to me as well. Instead of everyone always kind of reaching for me to give to them. I do need that same thing.
Yeah. Mm. So the journey that you went through to really embrace your value, what did that look like to where it wasn't just I'm valuable because I'm succeeding?
I think a lot of it really did have to do with childhood upbringing. Just the conversations with my grandparents and um, constantly hearing what God said about me and what God has for me. That's really where that's where I feel my value is what God says and not what other people say. Yes, I got bullied tremendously. Yes, I would come home crying from things that people say, but then, it's kind of like you cried out and then I'm like, well, you know what? Forget what they said. God said this about me and my granny said and my granddad said, and I would just constantly repeat those words of affirmation from them. And so that's really where my value lied is, and it's different nowadays. See, back in the day, we didn't have like a whole lot of social media and stuff like that where you're constantly getting a whole bunch of negativity. And so I think now kids need more than just, affirmation from home and those types of things. They're going to need a valley around them because it's constant, especially if you're getting bullied and those types of things. People do it on social media and those and that. So I can't imagine being a kid with what I went through in nowadays, but I will say back then there were challenges about my value, but it wasn't something that really stuck because I was able to get that positivity and that nurturing from home and able to remember that God had the ultimate say over me and who I was. And I have an old soul. Like most of my friends are like, you have an old. I do. And so I always, I would go to school and some of the stuff I forgot about. Like I was talking to somebody I went to school with, and she was reminding me how I helped her with her value because I was always talking about how great God was. I was like, really? We're in school, like middle school, and I'm like preaching to her about the goodness of God. And I had no idea that she was having a hard time. And she opened up to me and told me that I really helped her. Like every day I would get on the school bus talking about God's goodness and greatness and
Never know who we affect, do we? Just never
right.
know. Well, what I'm hearing you say is that your value came from embracing what you got from the relationships that were important to you, your relationship with the Lord and your relationship with your grandparents. What you internalized from them gave you value, not
Right.
what the world says, not what success did or didn't look like.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, good thing for us all to remember to internalize the things that people who love us that they affirm and what God says about us. So what did God say about you that you chose to hang on to that kept you moving forward?
Oh gosh. I feel like, and I'm always having these, I talk to God like a friend, and I'm like, really, why do I have to do that? It's just a remarkable thing that I recognize now what he's doing and has done with my life and why I'm still here. Because so when I look back at the letters that I wrote, I was basically asking him like, hey, why am I waking up every morning? I want to go to heaven. I'm ready. Like, I just did not want to be here. I wanted to be in heaven with my mom, and I just didn't understand why he didn't allow me to die. And so it took a long time for me to get an understanding from him on what his purpose was for me. And as far as his value for me, it just was something that it had to be a two-part conversation. Because like I said, I didn't want to talk about domestic violence with my mom or any of that. And it just kind of, just woke up and it happened. It was like something on my heart saying, okay, you need to do this. There are people that need to hear this. There is a reason for this needing to happen. And me trusting him and following through with that, I'm able to see the purpose now. But at the time, it was not. It was easy. It was very scary. And I tried to run from from it at first. I was doing everything else, but I was working in the sheriff department and doing different things. But now it's kind of like the joke is on me because it all kind of comes back. I was doing my own thing, but he already knew that this was going to be helpful for the stuff that I'm doing now. So all these little things I was doing, working in the sheriff department, working for probation, now working in criminal courts, it all just kind of came around. I'm like, really? I thought I was making my own decisions here.
Yeah.
And I wasn't.
I love it because he doesn't waste anything. He doesn't waste a single thing. It doesn't matter how bad or good it is. He's going to take it and he's going to use it. So sometimes when we are in the middle of the pain, well, most of the time when we're in the middle of the pain, we don't recognize the victories that we're gaining because we're still in the war, and so we're more focused on the pain than on the victories that we're winning. But when we take the time to look back and see the victories that we've had, for me, what I've seen is that kind of gives you permission to have a voice and speak to that. And so two things here. I'd love for you to talk about a specific victory or victories that you remember that really enforced to you that you have a voice. And for those who don't know you or much of your story yet, your voice, how beautiful that it transformed from I don't want to hear anything about my mother to now your nonprofit is called Cheryl's Voice, which is your mother's name. And so quite a journey you went through there, but could you just start with what do you remember? What victories do you remember that made that
one of my biggest victories, as I shared earlier, is that someone would sorry, that's my grandmother's clock that she loves so dearly. My grandmother passed away almost 2 years ago, and so this clock that goes off every 30 minutes, I think it is her. It was the love of her life, and so you will hear it. Sorry.
Anyway, that's a good thing.
And I'm like, why do I have to hear this clock? Anyway, some of the victories. One big one, as I shared earlier, is I remember being younger and someone would call me my mom's name, and it would just catapult me into like a rage of anger. Not necessarily about my mom, but it was just the fact that I didn't have her. And I would be like, stupid idiot, my name is LaTasha, and my mom's been dead for, so many years. And it would just make me so mad because I thought that was just so insensitive and all those things. And so a big victory is the fact that, and actually Cheryl's Voice, I started, I wanted to show honor. Once I did the investigation and found out all the resources that she did use, I said, me and like a couple other friends did Victory Over Violence, which is with the Women's Center. It's a 5K. And we just went and they supported me. And I was like, okay. So the next year I said I was going to have a team. And I just woke up one morning and it was like God laid on my heart, Cheryl's Voice. And I started sharing my story. And I said, my mom was a hero and I want this to be about her. I don't want it to be about me. And so now when people call me, and they do it a lot, because they assume Cheryl's Voice, my name is Cheryl, and they'll say, oh, Cheryl. And I'm like, no, my name is LaTasha, but I don't get mad. I don't get angry. I actually feel peace when they call me her name. But I correct them, what my name is, but it's not this huge ball of emotions and being upset. And I had to work through that in therapy. Work through the anger I had from my father and get to the point in my life to where, and I think that's a huge victory of, being able to didn't call my mom's name and not being upset or it setting me off into a whole nother group of emotions. And so, Cheryl's Voice exists. And because I want people to remember her name and say her name, because it's really, she saved me. I mean, she did everything she could to try to save both of us, but she couldn't. But she did save me. And so That's something that I want the world to know and remember anytime they hear the name Cheryl's Voice. Another victory really it goes in line with dating. For a longest time, I was very fearful of being in an abusive relationship, or my mom would automatically go, like, I could be dating someone that would say, hey, I called you, where were you at? And I'm like, oh, he's gonna kill me. And I would just literally like change my number, and it just was so like 0 to 100 in those situations, because I would just panic in full panic mode. And I had to work through that. Not everyone that asks a question is going to just go to the extreme. I'm still very protective of myself. I still go through probably more things than most people that are in dating mode, as far as background checking people and those types of things. And I'm not going to change that. But I want to say the victory in that is that I don't automatically assume the worst of people. I give them an opportunity, and I also give myself a chance to, I guess, live more instead of living in fear. And so that's something that it took a lot of prayer and counseling as well to get to that point in my life, to where I could say, wow, I'm not living in fear anymore. And I think that children who witness abuse and worse, any type of childhood trauma, we have a hard time. It's just when it comes to relationships, people getting taken advantage of, and then the world judges you by, there are people that do end up in abusive relationships, and the first thing people are asking is, well, why they're staying, instead of focusing on the abuser. And the focus should not be on why that person is staying, because you're not doing anything but hurting them more than what they're already hurting. So any other victories?
Glad you said that's good, because people are shamed for staying in a relationship that they're paralyzed with fear of trying to figure out how to get out of it.
Right. Absolutely. And my final victory is I know that it is not my fault. And that took me a long time to not blame myself for my mom's death. I mean, the reality is I was 18 months. There's nothing. I used to cry out to God asking him to forgive me, because I said, if I cried louder, my dad wouldn't have did this. And the reality is, there's nothing I could have done at 18 months to stop him from doing that. But in my mind, for a long time, I did blame myself for it. And so I'm at the point in my life where I don't blame myself. And I kind of put that blame where it belongs. And that's on my father.
Yeah. Thank you. Wow, what a journey. And the fear is, even with what we're talking about in living in 2020 this year, fear has caused people to do all kinds of crazy things. Fear is damaging relationships. Fear is causing people to go in a shell and isolate. Fear is doing so many things. It is a huge enemy. And I know your faith had a lot to do with overcoming that fear. I don't know if there's anything that you can speak to that, with anyone listening that's just paralyzed with fear over whatever that is.
My motto is the 3 C's: Christ, counseling, and coffee.
That's good.
Those are my 3 things that really help me with fear, and not only fear, but overcoming. Those are I can't say enough how, and I know a lot of times people, especially African-American people in the church, feel like counseling is just not, we don't tell people our business, but I'm like, yeah, you should. God made a therapist, so you need one. I just don't, I can't stress enough how, trauma counseling is very important, especially when you're dealing with something so traumatic, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's, anything. It's nothing wrong with opening up to someone and talking about how you feel. And it doesn't mean that you don't believe in God, because like I said, it's Christ, counseling, and coffee. I need all 3 of those in my life to be able to get up in the morning, to be able to do the work that I'm doing, to even be able to encourage or speak to others about things, because I just can't. I mean, I've been in therapy since I started. When I did my second year of college, once I started therapy, I never stopped, and it's just something that is needed. And so I think people that are struggling with fear, a lot of times it's the fact that they just don't know where to go. And you can talk to other people and they can give you all these different opinions and advices, and some is good, some is not. Some people will end up doing things that they probably shouldn't, but they still don't get a sense of relief or understanding until they really figure out, where it stemmed from, and start dealing with those layers, and then moving forward with that. So I think a lot of it, like I said, being open with God, and being open with, seeing a therapist to deal with those things is very important to deal with, especially when you're talking about fear and trauma.
Yeah, that's good. And when you say coffee, to me, I think, because I love coffee too, but coffee to me has a sense of community with it. I like to go have coffee with people, so those, whether it's a therapist, which I totally agree is wonderful and necessary when you're dealing with some trauma in your life, but just living in this world, we need community, and we need safe relationships that we can just sit down with a cup of coffee and share our hearts.
Yeah, those positive relationships are very important. Check your circle, people. If you have people in your circle that's constantly pulling from you and you're not able to pull from them as well, or you're pouring into each other, you might want to reevaluate that friendship, because you're in a time. I'm 37 years old now, and I'm really at the point in my life to where I'm constantly always busy, and I'm constantly always doing things, but I gotta have people that I can check in with, people that when things aren't going so well, or if I'm feeling not okay about something, I can call them and count on them to listen and give me good, solid advice, or pray with me, or whatever is needed. Or I can just text them and say, hey, I need y'all to pray with me about this, and they'll make it happen. And so that's, having those solid relationships, and being that friend for a friend, and having that friend do the same for you is very important.
It is. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. It truly is. I think that's one of the pictures of when the Lord talks about the body. I don't remember which chapter, but somewhere in there in First Corinthians, where it's like you're not all the eyeball, and you're not all the this or that or what. We got to be connected together for us all to function the best way that He designed us to. And so I like that. Check your circle, people. I like that. Yes, we need to do that regularly. Okay, so coming into a greater sense of identity of who LaTasha is through all of these things, you have had a greater influence. There's been more impact in your influence. Just even recognizing that. Can you speak to that? Why do you have? How does knowing your identity give you greater impact in your influence?
Honestly, I don't. I'm often told that, oh man, you inspired me and this and that, but I really just feel like I'm just LaTasha. So I'm still trying to work on, I guess, embracing when people tell me, how I inspired them or encouraged them, or how I was an impact to them. Because I really feel like I'm just an orphan girl who, we were not rich. I remember having food stamps, and being happy about, being one of the children. I was a child, since I was orphaned, I was a child on the angel tree. And, people from the community would buy gifts for me, which I may have crossed paths with some of those people at this point, since I'm 37. But being grateful for those things, and people blessing me from day one, and having that support. So I just, with my life now, I feel like I want to give back as much as possible. So that's why I approach domestic violence in a holistic manner, and not only domestic violence, but trying to reach as many youth as possible, letting them know that you do not have to be what statistics says you are, regardless of what your parents did or how you were brought into this world, you can change that. And it starts with hard work, and it starts with, dealing with your struggles in therapy, and then making a plan, making a decision on that you want something different. Because that's really where it started with me, with saying that, I don't want to be in an abusive relationship. I don't want to live in fear, and I don't want to, be, as the teacher said, statistics says about me. I want to prove them wrong. And so I am against the odds. And so when people look at my childhood trauma and they look at all, my name on CPS cases and all these other things, they were shocked that, wow, she's accomplished all these things. And so I want other youth to feel like, yeah, you can do the same thing. You do not have to succumb to what statistics says and what everyone else says. You just have to make a decision. And, life, we always say life is about choices, but choices also come with work. And you can't really make positive choices until you do the work to deal with the trauma.
Very good. That's very good. And you downplay the impact that you have by saying, I'm just LaTasha. But I just want to say, I think that's why you have the impact that you do, because you've embraced who LaTasha is. And you have the courage. It takes courage to be vulnerable. And you have stepped out in that courage to be vulnerable about who you are and what your struggles are and what you've overcome. And that is influence. People need to hear that. So for anyone that might be listening that's thinking, I don't have a story anywhere close to this, I don't have any platform for influence, what would you say to that?
I would say that you need to really pray and ask God what direction. And see, I jokingly say that was my mistake, asking God what He wanted me to do. Because when you do that, be prepared for the answer. Because everything that I'm doing is definitely not what I planned. Definitely, because I but so frustrated one day, and I was, what do you have for me? Like, what do you want me to do with my life? And it just started, all these doors open and things just started happening, and I started moving to the direction that He wanted me to go. And so as far as influence, everybody honestly has influence in different ways. I just feel like we all have stories. We all have something that we've been through, whether it's a tragedy or not. There are some positive things that people can learn from. And so don't, I guess, diminish yourself because you feel like, oh, well, it's not a big deal, because it is. Everyone can learn from everyone. And I think that whatever it is that you can offer and bring to the table, please share that, because heck, I may say, oh, wow, I didn't know that. For instance, Cheryl's Voice really was just a name attached to my 5K team. And one day I was speaking at University of Texas at Arlington, and a lady came down and said, Cheryl's Voice should be a nonprofit. I'm going to make that happen. And I'm like, I don't know anything about nonprofit, and I didn't need to, because they made it happen. So they were influenced to do that. And so I share that to say that everyone has influence. Depending on, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It's just going to look different from everybody.
Yeah. We've got to get in touch with our own story, though, don't we? And be honest about it. Yeah.
Exactly. Everybody has a story.
We all do.
I know most of the time when I have like speaking engagements, people may not really ask questions in front of everyone else, but then I have a whole line of people. I'm like, I'm not a celebrity, guys, but they be lined up to talk to me, and every one of them want to tell me their story, and I listen. So everyone has a story.
Yeah, you've given people the courage to ask those questions. So I just thank you for doing that. So when we talk about the P part of VIP, we're talking about the purpose, power, and potential. And so kind of a two-part question here for you. First of all, what is it that, or where does the power to live your purpose come from for you? You got to be scared sometimes, and you got to be exhausted, I know. Where does the power to keep going come from?
Honestly, it's twofold. It really does come from, me wanting to do what God wants me to do. It's like He gives me the energy to get up and do it. But also I really want to make my mom proud. Everything that I do, even when I wrote my thesis and now I'm working on my dissertation, and it's in honor of her. And it's just, I want to show that her dying was not in vain. And now that my grandmother's in heaven as well, I'm like, I have to keep going because I have two women who, risk it all for me. And I want to hold honor to them and show that, their work was well done, and also show that, and also show God that I'm going to be obedient in doing the things that He wants me to do. So I can honestly say that that's really where the power and the purpose comes from. It's just constantly staying the course. Are there times where I'm like exhausted? Yes, that's where counseling comes in, because you schedule time. My therapist constantly is like, did you take some time off? And I'm like, yeah, I took this day, because I had like over hundreds of hours of vacation time. It's like, you need to start doing some self-care. Just staying in the bed. Like Friday, I took off and I was in the bed, just kind of watching. I started watching some series or something I hardly ever do. Also delegating. I'm really big on trying to be all things for everybody. And so I had to change that and say, let me think about it, send me an email. And it gives me time to look at my calendar and really say, okay, I have too many things at one time. And so I've learned the word of saying no, which has really been hard for me, because I always felt like I want to do all these things, but I would say no, and then also pencil in some self-care time and some things like that. So I think a lot of times, especially as women, we juggle a lot of things, and we have to make sure that we are, when we're living out our purpose, that we are also delegating time to self-care, because you will burn yourself out.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay, this is a question for where you're at now. So after all of this journey that you've been through, now you are over the domestic violence diversion program, which means you're working with the abusers.
Yeah. So what happened?
How has that and how is that changing you?
Well, I will be 100% honest, because I don't tell lies. Initially, when I was asked about that program, I was like, hell no, are y'all crazy? Do you know? Like, no, if one of those people come in looking like my father, it is going down, because I was working with victims. My heart is with victims. I was working with victims of trafficking, and a lot of them had histories of domestic violence. And so I was solely focused on children and victims. I was not interested. I could care less about the abuser. I mean, I just wasn't interested. And so I made the mistake of saying, okay, well, I'll pray about it. When I was asked about it, I was like, I'll pray about it, and no, it's not happening. And I did, and God said to me that He wasn't done. He wanted me to approach domestic violence in a holistic manner. And so the last piece of that is dealing with the abuser. And if I can reach that abuser, get them the help that they need, then I'm actually helping the victim and potentially more victims that could come if that person doesn't be accountable. And so there are tough times because, I don't, for me, I am, I guess, a little biased when it comes to domestic violence. And I'm reading these offense reports, and it can be tough. I'm reading what this person has done. And, but then I remember, I'm like, if I don't hold this person accountable and then show them where they went wrong and the importance of dealing with this and getting their children who witnessed this some counseling, court or, mandating that, and getting the victim that's probably still with him some services, then I'm not doing honor to any of the work that I'm doing, and also the community. And so that's the way I look at it to be able to do it, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. But now when I look at the victories, and I look at, these guys and girls, now that was another shocker for me to see women who were arrested for domestic violence and quite honestly, female abusers are a lot harder to be accountable than male abusers. I will say I have my male abusers who will, admit what they've done. They'll start really making change, being serious about being accountable. They, identify that they're acting like their fathers who they didn't want to act like, but they never did anything to not act like. And so they start making all these changes. But when I get a female who is an abuser, a lot of them are like, he shouldn't have lied or he shouldn't have did whatever. And yes, I, did X, Y, and Z to him. And so that's been harder for me to get them to be accountable. And that's because society says that it's okay for women to be abusive. When a female is being cheated on and she goes over and beats him up with a bat or whatever, everyone's like, yeah, you should have did that. Yeah, he shouldn't have cheated. Versus if the roles were shifted, it will be a whole nother conversation. So I've learned so much working in that area. So I get what God's purpose of me being there is, but it was not my choice.
It's not easy choice. And I'm guessing that you've taken some steps toward maybe some forgiveness. And
yes. Well, and prior to, I had already forgiven my father. And so that was a big step as well as, I had already forgiven him for me, not for him, but I've done that part. It was just the fact that I always felt like the diversion program was kind of letting abusers off the hook. And then when I realized that, no, it really isn't. It's actually holding them accountable and then it's protecting victims. And I'm like, okay, I can do that.
Awesome.
And I hold them accountable.
I love how you reframed the way you thought about it, that it's actually helping the victim. I mean, helping the victims, but also, that forgiveness piece is for you. It's not for them. I think so many times somebody probably needs to hear this, that forgiving somebody does not let them off the hook. It lets you off the hook. It lets your heart go free. And so, that's quite a journey and a whole other discussion there, right?
Yep.
Okay, well, you're truly an example of a VIP. You truly are. I mean,
thank you.
The victories, your voice is amazing, what you're doing. Thank you for embracing your identity, because the impact and the influence that you're making in our community, but I believe it's just going so much further than that. And I think you need to get ready for that, because I think it's going further than our community. I thank you for the courage to do that and for using your purpose, letting the Lord's power help lead and guide you in that purpose and potential. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I'm just LaTasha.
Just LaTasha is quite a bit. I like that. Okay, so for anybody who wants to reach out to LaTasha, who wants to know more about Cheryl's Voice, her nonprofit, any questions regarding domestic violence, if you want to go deeper with this, her website is Cheryl's Voice. It's CHERYLS voice.org. And you can connect with her through that. And I encourage you to do that. And for any of you that are interested in developing more of your VIP, I encourage you to reach out to us at loudisnotalanguage.com as well. And you can email me personally at brenda@loudisnotalanguage.com. But we want you to be all that you were made to be and turn your low points, no matter how extreme or not extreme they are, into launch pads that God meant for you to live your purpose. So thank you for being a part of this today, LaTasha. Thank you, everyone that has listened. We appreciate you. Look for the second one in the series to come. Okay, thanks so much. Bye-bye.